The federal courtroom fell into complete silence as Judge Edith H. Jones, one of the most respected judicial figures in America, locked eyes with Representative Jasmine Crockett. For nearly 40 years, Judge Jones had approached every case with confidence, discipline, and unmistakable authority. But today carried a different weight. Today, she planned to confront an issue that had shaken the legal world for months. Congresswoman Crockett. Judge Jones began, her voice steady and shaped by decades on the bench. Your recent remarks about our justice system are deeply concerning. The way you've spoken about judicial independence reveals a serious misunderstanding of what the Constitution requires. The entire courtroom remained frozen. Reporters, legal scholars, attorneys, and everyday citizens had come expecting a routine judicial conference. Instead, they were witnessing a rare and extraordinary moment, a direct clash between a highly respected federal judge and a rising member of Congress. What happened next stunned everyone. In just a few calm, carefully crafted sentences, Representative Crockett delivered a response so thoughtful and unexpected that criticism turned into admiration, and silence transformed into long, heartfelt applause. This was far more than a tense courtroom exchange. It was about to become a powerful lesson in leadership, humility, and the true purpose of public service. If you want to see more inspiring moments where integrity, experience, and democratic values shape the future of our country, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Stories like these remind us why strong institutions matter, and you won't want to miss the ones ahead. To appreciate the full importance of this moment, we need to understand the two women at its center, one a legendary figure in the judiciary, the other an emerging force in American politics. Judge Edith Holland Jones represents the very best of the nation's legal tradition. Appointed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit by President Ronald Reagan in 1985, she has spent nearly 4 decades upholding the law with integrity, discipline, and deep constitutional knowledge. Now 74, she has ruled on more than 3,000 cases and is respected across ideological lines for her careful preparation, balanced approach, and unmatched grasp of constitutional principles. Raised in Philadelphia with strong traditional values, Jones graduated from Cornell University before earning her law degree from the University of Texas School of Law, where she was one of the few women in her class. Over the years, she became known for her sharp legal mind, direct courtroom manner, and unwavering belief that judicial independence is the cornerstone of American democracy. Recently, however, Judge Jones had grown increasingly concerned about political attacks aimed at the courts, especially from those who questioned judges' legitimacy when rulings conflicted with political goals. Meanwhile, Representative Jasmine Crockett had quickly become known as one of Congress's most outspoken new voices. At 43, the Texas lawmaker brought to Washington a strong background as a civil rights attorney and public defender. Her work on justice reform and her dedication to fighting inequality made her a champion for communities that often feel ignored. But some of her recent comments had stirred controversy among legal professionals. In hearings and interviews, Crockett criticized certain federal court decisions as outdated and suggested that some judges were slowing progress instead of delivering justice. Her supporters praised her honesty, but many legal experts viewed her remarks as disrespectful and unfair. Concerns about rising tension between political leaders and the judiciary had been growing for weeks. Scholars published opinion pieces stressing the need to respect judicial independence. Bar associations issued reminders about maintaining appropriate public discourse. Judge Jones, who rarely commented publicly on political matters, wrestled with whether she should address the issue directly. The opportunity came during the annual Federal Judicial Conference, a major event where judges, attorneys, and occasionally lawmakers come together to discuss major legal challenges. Crockett had been invited to speak about criminal justice reform, setting the stage for a dramatic and unforgettable moment. Have you ever seen one? Conversation completely shifts someone's point of view? Share your thoughts in the comments about why respectful dialogue between different branches of government is so important. We'd love to hear how moments like this have shaped your own understanding of leadership, fairness, and accountability. The morning sessions at the conference progressed normally until Representative Crockett approached the podium. Her speech was passionate and thoroughly researched, highlighting sentencing disparities, failing prison conditions, and the urgent need for deep reform. The audience listened closely as she outlined her legislative goals and long-term vision for justice. But about 15 minutes into her remarks, her tone changed, and the room's atmosphere changed with it. Too many federal judges, Crockett argued, are holding on to legal views that no longer reflect the realities of the society they serve. The law cannot remain static when our understanding of justice and equality keeps evolving. A faint ripple moved through the courtroom. Several judges shifted in their chairs, clearly unsettled by her critique. Crockett pressed on, her voice rising with urgency. When courts repeatedly issue decisions that reinforce structural inequality, we have to question whether those rulings truly promote justice, or simply preserve a system that was built for a different time. Judge Jones, seated in the front row, maintained her composure. Yet those familiar with her noticed a subtle tightening around her eyes. A silent indication that the stakes had suddenly increased, Crockett continued. The judiciary cannot claim absolute moral authority when its rulings consistently favor those already in power. Respect is not automatic. It must be earned through fair and equitable application of the law. The atmosphere shifted immediately. What began as a policy critique was turning into something far more confrontational. Legal observers exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that the moment had crossed into uncharted territory. At last, Judge Jones rose slowly from her seat. Despite being 74, she carried herself with a presence shaped by decades of disciplined service. As she walked toward the podium, the room fell into complete silence. "Congresswoman Crockett," she began, her tone firm yet measured, "I respect your commitment to reform, but I must address the implications in your remarks." Crockett blinked, clearly caught off guard, and straightened at the podium. Two powerful representatives of different branches of government now faced each other, and the outcome of this exchange would echo far beyond the conference room. Judge Jones spoke again. "Your recent comments, including those today, reflect a misunderstanding of the judiciary's constitutional function. When you suggest judges should rule based on desired social outcomes rather than adherence to precedent and constitutional text, you weaken the very principle that protects our freedoms, judicial independence." Her voice remained calm, but every word carried weight. She continued, "Additionally, when you argue that respect for judicial authority should depend on whether you agree with our decisions, you create a precedent that threatens the separation of powers, something our founders designed to safeguard liberty itself." Crockett fell silent, absorbing the gravity of what had just been said. The entire room held its breath. This was no longer a debate. It was a pivotal moment in the young lawmaker's understanding of constitutional responsibility. Finally, Crockett responded, her tone noticeably softer. "Judge Jones, I appreciate you addressing these concerns directly. Can you help me understand where I may have gone too far?" It was a simple question, but it changed everything. Instead of defending her earlier critique or turning the exchange political, Crockett chose honesty and a willingness to learn. Judge Jones paused, recognizing the significance of that choice. "Congresswoman," she replied, "your dedication to justice is important. But there is a critical difference between advocating for change through legislation and suggesting that judges abandon the legal framework they are sworn to uphold." The courtroom remained still as both women engaged in what was fast becoming a profound conversation about duty, integrity, and mutual respect among the branches of government. "When you dismiss judicial decisions based only on whether you like their results," Judge Jones explained, "you contribute to eroding public trust in the courts. When that trust fades, it hurts the very communities you want to protect. Because the rule of law is their strongest safeguard against unchecked authority." Crockett listened carefully, her posture open, her expression reflective rather than defensive. "Judge Jones," she said slowly, "I can see now that my frustration with certain outcomes may have led me to speak in ways that weren't fair. How can someone in my position continue fighting for reform while still showing the respect required for judicial independence? What followed left everyone stunned, including Judge Jones herself. Instead of retreating, doubling down, or deflecting, Representative Crockett made a choice that changed the entire tone of the encounter. "Judge Jones," she said, her voice carrying genuine humility and newfound clarity, "I need to ask something." A wave of gasps rolled through the courtroom, in a time when most public officials rarely admit they were wrong. This gesture of humility felt almost unbelievable. Several attorneys exchanged wide-eyed looks, and even the court reporters paused, their fingers hovering above their keyboards as they struggled to capture what they were witnessing. Crockett continued, her voice gaining steadiness as she spoke with growing honesty. "My frustration with outcomes I believed were unjust pushed me to say things that were inappropriate and disrespectful toward the judiciary. I now see that I let my passion for justice overshadow my understanding of constitutional limits and the proper balance between our branches of government." Judge Jones's expression softened. Though she maintained her characteristic composure, the silence in the room became absolute, so deep that even the usually detached bailiffs leaned forward to hear every word. As someone who has practiced law, Crockett went on, hands clasped in a gesture of genuine remorse, "I should have known better. The strength of our legal system comes from judicial independence, not from judges deciding cases based on polls or social pressure. My comments suggested something different, and I am sincerely sorry." The transformation in tone was remarkable. What began as a tense and unpredictable clash had evolved into a profound exchange rooted in accountability and mutual respect. Many seasoned attorneys later admitted they felt emotional listening to the sincerity in Crockett's apology. Judge Jones stepped nearer to the podium, her robes rustling softly in the stillness. Her posture shifted, subtly still authoritative, yet infused with a warmth more often seen in mentors than in judges on the bench. "Congresswoman," she said, her voice carrying both wisdom and genuine encouragement, "your willingness to reflect and correct yourself shows the kind of character our democracy depends on. It takes real courage to admit error publicly, especially for someone in your position." She paused, letting the message resonate. "And more than that, your commitment to justice is essential. When guided properly, it helps ensure that our legal framework improves over time. The legislative branch has the power to fix laws that no longer serve their purpose. My concern was never with your goals, but with the way you suggested achieving them." Crockett nodded, all defensiveness gone. "Judge Jones," she asked softly, "would you help me understand how I can push for reform while still honoring judicial independence?" It was an extraordinary request, a sitting member of Congress seeking constitutional guidance directly from a federal judge. The humility in the room became almost tangible. Observers later said they had never seen an elected official display such openness and willingness to learn. For the first time during the exchange, Judge Jones smiled, a small gesture, but one that transformed her usually firm expression. "Congresswoman," she replied warmly, "I would be honored to show you how strong advocacy and institutional respect can support each other rather than conflict." She turned slightly, now addressing not just Crockett but everyone present. This conversation had become a lesson for the whole room. "The beauty of our constitutional system," Judge Jones explained, adopting the tone of a teacher imparting something deeply important, "is that each branch has its own role, and those roles work best when respected. Your duty is to identify flaws in our laws and correct them. Our duty is to apply those laws faithfully according to the Constitution, not according to what we hope the outcome will be." She pointed toward the framed Constitution on the wall. "When you encounter rulings that seem to sustain injustice, the solution is not to blame judges for following the law. The solution is to ask whether the law itself needs to change. That approach preserves institutional boundaries while still allowing meaningful progress." Crockett listened carefully, opening a small notebook and writing down key points not as a politician preparing talking points, but as a student absorbing insight. The sight sent another wave of amazement through the courtroom. "So," Crockett said, Looking up, when I see sentencing disparities that feel unfair, I should focus on reforming sentencing statutes rather than criticizing judges who apply them as written. Exactly, Judge Jones answered, approval evident in her tone. And when you pursue that work with genuine respect for judicial independence, the judge continued, you'll find that many judges actually welcome reforms. We confront the limitations of existing laws every day, but our oath binds us to apply them as they are written, not as we wish them to be. Judge Jones paused for a moment, then spoke with remarkable sincerity. I have spent 37 years on this bench, and in that time I have seen even well-crafted laws produce consequences no one intended. Many judges would welcome legislative reforms that correct those issues. But those reforms must come through lawful constitutional channels, not through political pressure meant to influence how judges decide cases. Crockett's expression shifted as understanding dawned on her. So you're saying judges and lawmakers should work as partners to improve the justice system, not as adversaries fighting over outcomes? Exactly, Judge Jones answered, nodding with clear approval. When each branch honors the responsibilities of the other, we can advance justice while still protecting the constitutional safeguards that defend everyone's rights. The atmosphere in the courtroom transformed completely. What began as a tense and unpredictable confrontation had become a powerful lesson in constitutional balance, cooperation, and mutual respect. Legal scholars in attendance would later describe the exchange as a moment future generations would study as an example of how democratic institutions should function. Judge Jones. Crockett said, her voice carrying new purpose, I want to make a public commitment to change how I speak about judicial decisions. From this point forward, my advocacy will focus on reforming laws, not attacking the judiciary. And I hope you will hold me accountable to that promise. She turned to the audience and continued, I also want to apologize to any judges who felt disrespected by my earlier comments. Those of us in elected office owe you better, Judge Jones replied with unmistakable warmth. Congresswoman Crockett, your commitment is noted and deeply appreciated. And yes, I will hold you accountable, not as an adversary, but as a colleague equally committed to upholding our constitutional system. The moment that followed would stay with everyone present for the rest of their lives. The courtroom erupted in spontaneous applause, a sight almost unheard of in federal courts. At first, a few attorneys began clapping, then the sound spread until the entire gallery stood in appreciation. Even the normally reserved court staff joined in. Judge Jones allowed the applause to continue for nearly a full minute before gently raising her hand to restore order. When silence returned, she delivered what many later called the perfect closing message for this extraordinary exchange. What we have witnessed today, she said, her voice carrying both authority and genuine humanity, is exactly what the framers envisioned, different branches of government engaging in respectful dialogue, each committed to serving the American people while staying within constitutional limits. She turned directly toward Crockett. Congresswoman, you have shown us that real leadership sometimes means admitting mistakes and choosing growth over pride. That is the character our democracy needs now more than ever. As the session ended, something unprecedented occurred. Several judges approached Crockett personally, shaking her hand and thanking her for her humility and renewed dedication to constitutional principles. Observers described it as one of the most powerful displays of institutional cooperation they had ever seen, a moment where conflict became collaboration through honesty and respect alone. The impact did not stop in that courtroom. Within hours, video clips of the exchange spread across social media, reaching millions and drawing praise from citizens of every political background. What made the moment resonate so deeply was its rarity. In an era of polarization and constant attacks on public institutions, here was a sitting member of Congress openly acknowledging error and seeking wisdom from a federal judge. It felt like a return to principles many Americans feared had disappeared. Major news organizations highlighted the story, celebrating both Crockett's humility and Judge Jones's grace and clarity. Legal scholars from across the ideological spectrum pointed to the exchange as a model for how branches of government should communicate with honesty, respect, and shared commitment to the Constitution. What we saw today was truly exceptional, Harvard Law professor Lawrence Tribe remarked. Representative Crockett demonstrated that political courage can mean admitting you were wrong, and Judge Jones showed how judicial authority can be exercised with strength and humility. Even the American Bar Association issued a formal statement commending both women for embodying the highest ideals of public service and democratic leadership. The statement emphasized that maintaining healthy, respectful relationships between the branches of government is not optional, it is essential to a functioning democracy. That moment became a profound turning point for Representative Jasmine Crockett and reshaped the direction of her advocacy and public service. In the interviews that followed, she spoke openly about how deeply the exchange had changed her perspective. "Judge Jones taught me something I will carry for the rest of my life," Crockett explained during a national television interview. "She showed me that you can fight with every ounce of your energy for justice without disrespecting the institutions that make justice possible. My responsibility isn't to pressure judges into ruling the way I want, it's to craft better laws that allow them to deliver justice more effectively." When she was asked why she felt compelled to issue such a public apology, Crockett's answer revealed genuine growth. "Sometimes the most important thing a leader can do is admit when they're wrong," she said. "I realized that the way I had been speaking was actually weakening the goals I care about. Judge Jones helped me see that institutional respect and justice reform do not compete, they support each other." Judge Jones, in her own reflections afterward, emphasized how significant the exchange was for American democracy. "What Congresswoman Crockett demonstrated is exactly what our system needs," she said. "Leaders who are willing to learn, to grow, and to place integrity above ego. The separation of powers only works when each branch respects the others, and today's discussion proved that passionate reform and institutional fidelity can coexist." The impact of their conversation reached far beyond that courtroom. Law schools across the nation began using clips of the exchange in constitutional law classes to teach students about interbranch respect and the importance of constructive dialogue. Political science professors highlighted it as a real-world example of democratic functioning, each branch maintaining independence while still engaging in meaningful conversation about shared responsibility. Perhaps most striking was how it influenced political behavior in the real world. In the weeks after the event, several other lawmakers publicly reconsidered their own rhetoric about the judiciary, citing Crockett's willingness to reflect as inspiration for their own change in tone. 6 weeks after the original exchange, Representative Crockett and Judge Jones appeared together at a major constitutional law symposium. What once seemed impossible became reality. Two women who had begun in confrontation now stood side by side as partners in dialogue. Their presentation on advocacy, reform, and respect drew standing ovations from attorneys, scholars, and students alike, and was widely praised as a model for how branches of government should communicate. "What I learned from Judge Jones," Crockett told the audience, "is that real reform begins with understanding and respecting the system you want to improve. You cannot strengthen institutions by tearing down the trust that sustains them." Judge Jones responded by commending Crockett's growth as a public servant. "Congresswoman Crockett has shown that passionate advocacy and institutional respect can reinforce each other in powerful ways. Since our exchange, her legislative work has become both more effective and more aligned with constitutional limits." The long-term influence of their exchange continued to inspire lawyers, policymakers, and citizens. Young attorneys cited it as a guide for how to admit mistakes with grace. Future policymakers referenced it when discussing how humility can transform conflict into cooperation. As one constitutional law professor later wrote, "What Judge Jones and Representative Crockett gave us that day was more than an example of respect between institutions. It was a masterclass in how American democracy is meant to function when people choose principle over pride and learning over being right." Their exchange reminded Americans that democratic institutions do not grow stronger by avoiding disagreement but by engaging in it with honesty, humility, and shared commitment to the Constitution. At a time when such examples seemed increasingly rare, that moment in a federal courtroom rekindled hope that wisdom, civility, and integrity can still guide public life. In the end, Judge Edith Jones's call for judicial independence and Jasmine Crockett's heartfelt commitment to growth did more than surprise a room full of observers. They delivered a lasting reminder: American democracy thrives when leaders are willing to learn, evolve, and place institutional integrity above their own egos. If this story of wisdom, humility, and genuine leadership restored your faith in public service, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We're committed to bringing you more stories that showcase character, courage, and constitutional values in action. Let us know in the comments which other examples of real leadership or institutional integrity you'd like us to explore next.